Now that we worked with percents and fractions and decimals yesterday, today we're going to apply how we can use these percents, especially in the real world. Copy down your target, try the warm-up problems, and then we'll get started. Pause the video now. Okay, so for the target, you have that written. For the warm-up, she found a dress. It's $90, but it's 40% off. So A, how much money will she save? You should just find the 40% of 90. She get $36. How much then will she pay for the dress? Now you just subtract that 36 from the original cost, and she's going to pay $54 for the dress. So we have a couple applications for percents. The first one we're going to talk about is commission. And what is commission? Write this down on your paper. Commission is money paid to a person or a company for making a sale. Money paid to a person or company for making a sale. That's what commission is. So for the first one, Mr. Clark earns a base salary of $42,000 plus 1.5% commission on sales when he graduates college. His total sales in 1 year was $700,000. Find his total pay for the year. Here's what you need to know. For the total pay, it's always going to be made up of whatever his base salary is plus the commission. And the commission is always going to be a percent as a decimal times how much he sold. So you have to pull the information out of this problem here. What's important? Fill in what you know. What does this 42,000 represent? What does this 1.5% have to do with anything? And what does this 700,000 have to do with anything? Well, his base salary was the 42,000, so that's going to go in right here. And then to find his commission, you're going to add, you need to multiply the percent that he's making commission on times how much his sales were. 1.5% doesn't go into the equation like that. Remember that it must be a decimal. So what is 1.5 as a decimal? Move it over 2. And there's your commission rate. Then his sales were the 700,000. That's going to be multiplied by it. So you can definitely use your calculator here. I would type this in first, multiply that, figure out what that gets you, then add the 42 to it. So what does that come out to be? Use your calculator to do it. Hopefully you found 10,500. So his total pay is going to be $52,000 and $500. Commission's the first application that we can use percents in. We also have percents in estimating tips. You know, think about it, you go to the store, you have to pay sales tax, and you only have a $20 bill, you better figure out how much money how much you can afford to buy or how much you can afford to spend in sales tax and tips, any of those. So we're going to do an example together, and then you're going to try the next one on your own for number 3. But for number 2, the dinner check for Malcolm's family is $67.95. Estimate a 15% tip. When you're doing this, when you're estimating, when you see that word estimating, you're allowed to round here. So I would first start by rounding the bill. You know, $67.95, that's a lot to work with. This is about $70. Let's focus on that. And then you can also look at the percent that you're using. Sometimes you can round that too. 15% I wouldn't round, but I would break it down into what's easier. It's easy to find 1%. It's easy to find 10%. So think of the 15 as 10% and then maybe 5%. And we know that 5% is really just half of the 10, right? So here, what is 10% of $70? Well, 10% of $70 is just going to be 0.1 times 70. That's really easy. That should just be $7. Now we want to add to that 5%. If 10% was 7, what is half of that for 5%? Half of 7 is $3.50. So sum it up. A good appropriate tip would be about $10.50. Now you try the next one, estimating the sales tax on Tana's shoes. Pause the video, try it, write down your work, and then press play. So for Tana's shoes, I would estimate the cost of her shoes. I would also round the sales tax. So here's what I would be focused on. The shoes are about $20 and the sales tax is about $7. We know that, we might have to round it up just a little bit more in how much she needs, but just this is going to give us an approximation of how much the sales tax is going to cost her. Now 7%, you can't break it down to 10 and 5. So we could break it down to 5, but 5% isn't super easy to find. How about 1%? What's 1% of 20? 1% of 20 is 0.2 or 20 cents, right? And then how many of those do you have to get 7% sales tax? Once you have the 1%, just multiply it by 7. So 1% is 0.2. We have 7 of those. That's going to be about $1.40 in tax. Keep in mind it might be a little bit more since we rounded the sales tax rate down, but it'll be pretty close to it. And our third application for today is going to be interest. So you have a couple definitions here you'll have to write down. I'm going to talk while you're writing, and then if I move on, please pause if you didn't finish these. Interest is the amount of money charged for borrowing money or the amount of money earned for saving or investing money. So it's really nice when we can earn money. It's not so great when we have a credit card and we have to pay interest. The principal is always the initial amount of money that you're starting with. And the simple interest is only paid on the principal. We're going to talk about a compound interest just as an extension for today, but really all you need for class is simple interest. You don't have this interest formula on your paper, so please make sure you add this to your sheet. You can write it right in the margin. Interest is equal to PRT. And here's what each of those letters mean. So I is your interest, P is the principal, what are you starting with? And R is the rate. Keep in mind, it needs to be as a decimal. Very important that you don't just plug in the percent they give you. So finish copying that. If you need more time, pause, and then we'll move on to example 4. So for example 4, I want you to find the simple interest paid annually for 2 years on a $900 loan at 16% per year. I like to start by setting up all my letters over here and seeing what I have. When I hit this 2, what does this represent? Well, find the simple interest paid annually for 2 years. That's my time. And T must be in years. So you must have time in years. Let's go back and make sure that I didn't even put it on my list here. T is time in years. Make sure you add that in. It must be years. So if I give you months, you're going to have to make it a fraction or decimals of a year. So T is the 2. It's on a $900 loan, so that's how much I'm taking out total. That's my principal. And then it's 16% per year, so that's my rate. Remember, you have to make it a decimal, so move it over 2. My rate is actually 0.16. So in this first problem, the I is what I don't know, the interest. Plug everything in here. I'm going to leave the I as my variable. P is the 900. The rate is the 0.16. And the time is 2. Now you can definitely use a calculator here to multiply these. I would definitely do some numbers that are a little easier first. Maybe I would do the 900 times 2 in my head because I can handle that. And then you can use your calculator for this one. When you get this, how much are they paying in interest? About $288. If you leave the I in there, you don't really hit the label because we know that the I is for interest. Make sure you have units on here. We're talking about money, so the money symbol is important. For number 5, then, I want you to try this one. This one's going to be a little different. You may not be solving for the same thing. But pause, try it, then press play. Okay, hopefully you've tried 5 at this point. On this one, hopefully you notice it's also a little different. We actually had the interest this time. We didn't have the principal. They said the simple interest paid on a loan was the $306. So that's going in over here. If you put it in as the principal, you're going to have to change all of your work. Also, it was a little tricky because I was only doing this loan for 6 months. 6 months isn't a whole year. Time must be in years. So you have to think about, well, 6 months is what part of a year? Or it's 6 out of 12 months. So you could do 6 out of 12, which reduces down to 1/2. And you multiply and you found that the principal was $7,650. So pause if you need to correct that. If you don't need to correct it, way to go. So this last part here is just an extension. You don't need to know this for upstairs, but I thought I would show it to you. Compound interest is interest that's paid on the principal and also on the interest from the past years. So this is super awesome if you're earning compound interest. It's really bad if you have compound interest on a credit card. You know, if you don't pay all your principal off and you owe interest, then you can earn interest on the interest and owe even more. So it's not a good thing in that sense. There's the formula for you, and I need to fill all these in. So this formula is a little more complicated. You do not have to know this. I just want you to try it this one problem with me today. Notice the only new part here is the n. The n is the number of times interest is compounded per year. So if I say that interest is compounded annually, then if it's compounded annually, then it'll be once a year. If it's compounded semi-annually, that's going to be twice a year. So let's read this problem. Sam plans to put $750 into an account and leave it there for 4 years while he goes to college. The account earns 4.25% interest compounded semi-annually. How much will Sam's account be? So here we have the 4.25. That's going to be your n. So it's going to be that's not going to be your n, that's going to be your r, but as a decimal. So 0.425, put the decimal point in there. It's going to be there for 4 years, so that's your t. It's semi-annually, so that's twice a year, that's n. And then the principal is the 750. So now plug those numbers in. Try this on your calculator. See if you can type it all in. It's a lot to put in, but you're going to be doing 750 times 1 plus the 0.0425 over 2, and then it's raised to 2 times 4. Try plugging that in on your calculator. See what you get. See if you get the right answer. While you're doing that, I'm going to keep showing my work here. And you should end up with $887.40. I personally would divide this first on your calculator, then add 1, then raise it to the 8th exponent, then multiply it by 750. All right, there's a little extension for you. Now you're ready for the quick check.